Good morning and welcome to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, Harry Jackson, coming to you from sunny downtown Beltsville, Maryland. And if I were a politician, I'd be in trouble today because it is not sunny and it is not downtown, but it is Beltsville, Maryland. Welcome to the Harry Jackson Show. We have an exciting show for you today. Today is Women's Day, and you guessed it, I'm not a woman, but Vivian Jackson is, and she is going to be with us. My wife of now going on 38 years, uninterrupted marriage. We've never been divorced from each other, never been married to anyone else, and that seems to be miraculous. I'm looking forward to the 40th anniversary in a couple of years, knowing that that'll really put us in the rarefied air in this culture's marriage arena. Today on our broadcast, though, we're going to begin to talk about several issues of national consequence. In the second segment, as you know, we have a huge emphasis in that segment about our guest, and we're going to have Joanne Martin, founder of National Great Blacks in Wax Museum. And we're going to be talking about the achievements of African American women. Third segment is unusual for us to have a guest in that segment, and B, a guest of such illustrious background. We will have Alveda King, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., will be with us. And she'll talk about the legacy of Dr. King. And what I like about that is that it's timely in the news as well. I was with her at a retreat with several leaders in Dallas, Texas, about 3 weeks ago. And at that time, she had some things to say. We were able to share some of those thoughts on the Roland Martin show on TV One, which has a predominantly African-American audience, about what should happen with the King Bible and his actual physical Nobel Prize, which was an amazing thing that it was being talked about as being up for grabs or up for sale, and that there's lawsuits and other things. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but hopefully she will bring us a real perspective on Dr. King and his life. And Alveda is a dear friend of mine, and Dr. Vivian, but she's also a voice reminding us about the legacy of Dr. King. And I know she's also been on the Urban Family Talk Network recently this week. So this is our time. A little shout out for Will Addison down in Mississippi, in Tupelo, in headquarters. Will, if you can hear us, I know you can. We appreciate all you and Miki are doing, and they are expecting their fourth child right now. And so the Urban Family Talk Network is going to multiply on many levels. In the personal level, with a new child in that family, and we believe that we're getting the word out in a unique way. Today is Women's Day. It is a good day when Joanne Martin is going to be with us of National Great Blacks in Wax Museum. If you've never heard of that, what a thrill you're going to get to understand about that and then get perspective. And last but not least, in the last segment, Dr. Alveda King. And she's the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and she will also be informative and inspirational. Today we have 4 stories, and they are really challenging to me. One is intellectually challenging. The other 3 have various levels of information that will challenge us to step up if we want to change and develop our society appropriately. Let me take them off for you. Number 1, the CBO says that 500,000 jobs are going to be cut with the new minimum wage hike. 500,000 jobs. That is amazing. although it will lift some people out of poverty, which is the good news, it will unfortunately do what we've been saying and declaring as an unintended consequence. It will make some employers not hire other folk. And if you are living in the greater Washington, D.C. area, that affects African Americans here more so than any other community. It affects African American males whose unemployment level in Washington, D.C., many don't know, in Ward 8 and 9 is at 21, 22%, the total unemployment, and black male in unemployment is 50% of Ward 7 and Ward 8 people. See, this is pandemic in that it slices wrongly toward blacks, even though we often are the ones who want to tout the need for a minimum wage. What we need is job retraining. Also, we have a historic opportunity in the state of Maryland for the state to elect the first black, should I say it this way? This is a joke, brace yourself. We're going to have the first openly black mayor, governor in the state of Maryland. He's openly black. And, some people want to keep that secret, but he's out there. And that's my little funny sense of humor. But Lieutenant Brown is an interesting person. He's garnering support. And in this election, what we have is Doug Gansler, who was a person many are forgetting, who accelerated our trajectory towards same-sex marriage, even though he's a Republican. He said that he was not going to enforce same-sex marriage laws, and his quote, uncivil civil disobedience and his role as Attorney General predated the president's actions. In other words, he led the way in not wanting to enforce DOMA, in not wanting to carry out the things that led to same-sex marriage, having quite a few victories over the last several years. So he's a Republican, and you have a group here of voters who are largely African American and Hispanic in our state. They have no reason to cross the line to vote for a Republican in name only who has no moral values. And they're not talking about the issues of our day. We'll come back to that in just a moment because we have Gracie Staples in the room with us. And we're putting her on blast. She's a co-host of our program each Wednesday, but she's going to weigh in on this issue with us in just a moment. There's a watch gun technology that's out, story number 3, where the watch and the gun have to hook up, and there's new technology at the same time. A breakthrough technology is a gun with a fingerprint pattern. And what that means for me is that children, you always hear a story at least once a year of a child who gets a hold of a gun and they accidentally discharge it and they're killed, or they shoot their friend or something of that nature. A child will not be able to pull the trigger of the fingerprint gun and it operate. Neither is it likely, if the watch and the gun are kept separately, that a gun in the house with a watch technology would in fact go off in the hands of a child. Then someone steals your gun, they can't use it. And that is a great thing in terms of criminalization of use of guns in Maryland and D.C. Pretty much the streets are rife with guns, but the good guys don't have them. And the quintessential argument that people make for guns being allowed and Second Amendment rights is the fact that the guys who need the guns to protect themselves in places like D.C. don't have the guns. We need one gun per 1,000 in the ghetto that works, and I guarantee you there'll be a whole lot less shootings by guys who are big and bad enough to shoot high-powered, multi-firing weapons in a region where they know nobody legal is going to have a gun. If there were a bunch of legal folk with guns, I think they'd think twice about coming out. Ukrainian violence. There are finally is a story about the Ukraine that deals with the violence there and protests against the USSR. Some years ago, I had the privilege of going to the Ukraine, being there to teach in a Ministers Training Institute, Bible school. It was amazing. There's no danger in Sochi at this point. And we find that there was a lot of poverty back then, 20 years ago. I also found that things like people kidnapping folk and stealing their organs, taking out kidneys and various other things was a common trade back then. Prostitution was rampant. I'll never forget being there in a major hotel and doors and people coming to my doors, women knocking at my door in the middle of the night. Prostitution was allowed, condoned in the hotels. Very different moral climate than the U.S. of A. And there was an amazing black market, and the cost of something like peanut butter, even back then, due to inflation and the exchange rates being off the chart, was peanut butter was a luxury. And it was interesting to go out with Christian workers to stores and take just a few American dollars and buy them some luxury items as a way of saying thanks for interpreting as I spoke and as a way of encouraging them in the struggle. We're going back through the major studies and the major stories today. What do you all think about the fact that new guns could make a difference? The Washington Post calls this title, quote, "The iPhone of guns could transform firearms industry." And that's what they call that phone that requires, the iPhone of guns, forgive me, that gun that can't be fired without a watch, and that gun that can't be fired without a fingerprint. Grace Staples, do you think that this is a positive breakthrough or making bad things even worse?
I think it's making bad things even worse, because who's to say that a child doesn't get the watch? Who's to say if you need to use the gun that it's not that it's going to, that it's not going to fire? So I just think this is just more gobbledygook. The iPhone
is that
guns.
Right? well, I'm going to say the child's not going to get the watch or the gun, but I understand what you're saying is if that child is intent and there hasn't been the right training and gun safety. You realize that in the great state of Tennessee and in Arkansas, church we were with, Dominion Church the other day, they have gun safety classes regularly held at the church. That is an outreach because everybody got a gun.
Everybody got a gun.
Everybody got a gun. What say you, Dr. Vivian? Do you agree with Gracie Staples?
I think gun control is important, and I think that people who have guns need to learn how to use them well. So I think the classes are important. I think that, the right to bear arms in America is really important. And so if you're really into guns, you just need to be very skillful. You get to pull the trigger once. And so whatever the target is, it must come down. So, the classes are important. And then if you don't keep the bullets with the gun, and you don't leave your children unattended, the whole thing of the kids finding the gun and all of that, is kind of a moot point. So, I'm all for guns.
Well, we have a difference of
opinion. And I like the idea of technology enhancing what I would be able to do. So that's great.
Yeah.
My gun, my fingerprint, my firearm, and if the catch is you can't use it because it doesn't have you can't use my fingerprint, hey, it's wonderful.
Well, that's what it is. Now, the problem is they have not created a technology that'll make the gun shoot straight.
It's all right. That's my part. I'll practice. Okay, my question is, what if the battery goes out on the watch?
And the gun doesn't shoot when you need it. I need it to shoot. It doesn't fire.
That would be a mess.
I think to Gracie Staples' point, and a good point it is, I think there needs to be some engineering specifically around the issue of home safety, specifically around children, at least in the news in our day. There's too much of that. Right after the break, Joanne Martin. Have you ever seen a black and white woman in wax? Well, there's a great black wax museum. And Alveda King will also be with us on the program. It's going to be a great time. Stay tuned to the Harry Jackson Show.
With today's Faith to Action commentary, here's Janet Porter.
Baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and the homosexual agenda? That's where Chevrolet is driving America during the Olympics. One ad tries to normalize homosexual behavior by depicting a male couple with his son and daughter. Another goes even farther, showing a homosexual wedding with a voiceover stating, like the old love, the new love starts with a kiss. The most effective action you can take is to contact your local Chevrolet dealer and urge them to quit pushing the homosexual agenda. Post your comments on Chevrolet's Facebook page and call them at 800-222-8782. That's 800-222-8782. Let them know how many people they've just alienated.
Visit f2a.org for more commentaries and action steps, along with news, links, and much more for your state. Go to f2a.org.
At my family's favorite ice cream chain, well, you know the one where you can choose your favorite ingredients and then they mix all those incredible flavors together right in front of you. Well, as they create your ice cream masterpiece, you can choose one of three sizes: the I really like it, or the small size, the I love it a lot, or the medium, and the I gotta have it, or, well, you guessed it, the large size. And as we order, my kids and I think we need the gotta have it size, and my wife says, come on, do you really need it? It got me thinking, though, about my relationship with God's Son. Do I like Him? Do I love Him? Or have I got to have Him? And maybe that's where you are right now. Your relationship with Jesus is just that. It's your relationship. Have you been holding back and just tasting Jesus? Or do you want to find out more by stepping out and saying, I've got to have you? To find out more about the life that Jesus has for you, call 888-NEED-HIM. That's 888-NEED-HIM. Or chat with us live at needhim.org.
When a man finds a woman and marries her, he's found a good thing indeed. Unfortunately, some wives spend their entire lives struggling with their worth and value, especially if she considers all the other women her husband could have chosen. The church is called to be the bride of Christ. God chose us, the followers of Christ, to be joined to Him in deep relationship. He's essentially set us apart from everyone else. But for some reason, it seems we're constantly trying to be like the world. We're constantly trying to look like someone else, talk like someone else, even act like someone else. We just don't see ourselves as the Lord sees us. In spite of all of our imperfections, we're still His bride, and He's called us to be different from the world. Let's live set apart. Let's strive to be that radiant bride our bridegroom has chosen. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Nikki Addison. Go deeper at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Good morning. I'm Vivian Jackson, and this is Women's Day, and you're listening to the Harry Jackson Show. How are you today? I hope you're doing great. Well, you know, we have an exciting program today. We have two phenomenal women who will be with us. Joanne Martin, who is the founder of the National Great Blacks and Wax Museum in the Baltimore City area. And then we're going to be talking about the legacy of Dr. King with Alveda King from Alveda King Ministries. So it's great. So this morning we're going to talk about the achievements of African-American women throughout history. Dr. Martin, are you with me?
I am.
How are you today, ma'am?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I just want to share with everyone that you and your husband are the founders of the Blacks and Wax Museum. And, you know, my phone is going off in my purse. Sorry about that noise. And it's a dream that you had to capture history in that way. And would you talk a little bit about that?
Well, my husband, my late husband, Elmer, who died in 2001 in Egypt, was very much an activist, very much a product of his time, of the Black consciousness, Black power, civil rights era. And he talks about being on the faculty of Morgan State University with the generation over from us as a young couple just out of graduate school. That his college-age students didn't feel that learning Black history and culture would be of any value. It wouldn't get you the American dream or the middle-class dream or the corporate dream. And then my husband, who sponsored a Little League baseball team of Baltimore City youth, had one youth come up to him with an ID picture that my husband had taken of him. The kid was very upset, saying that he wanted Elmer to force the photographer to take the picture over. And when Elmer asked him why, he said, because they got me too Black in this picture. So with college students, a generation over from us saying that career-wise it's possible to be too Black, and then a young kid 2 generations over almost saying physically it's possible to be too Black, when we thought we had gotten beyond that because we were Black and beautiful and Black and proud and saying it loud. And that was very, very disconcerting. So the museum, trying to shorten this story, puts a face on history, and it says from a very dark Marcus Garvey to a very light Walter White and everything in between, this is who we are, and we want our children to embrace that, and we want all children to have an appreciation for those stories that make up the fabric of America and all of the contributions of people to this country and this world.
It's very interesting that the shade of Black, shade of brown is still an issue among African-American peoples. We see that throughout the diaspora. This whole thing of lightening the race is something that is still practiced in our country. And I think that, that's kind of hard to swallow sometimes in families when you are not the favored child because you're not the fair-haired child.
Exactly.
So that's a whole nother discussion, but it is a reality, and we understand that because of racism in America, the lighter the better.
Exactly.
Just so that the majority population, they aren't even majority anymore, the ruling class has the opportunity and a level of comfort in relating to you. But that's another discussion. I want to thank you for the Blacks and Wax Museum. I was in the Southwest Airport the other day, the Southwest Terminal at the Baltimore-Washington Airport, and I saw 2 of your figures. There was Thurgood Marshall and Mary McLeod Bethune. And I was walking toward them. I thought they were the Southwest ticket agents.
Well, thank you. Southwest Airlines is our sponsor. I'm in Panama City, Florida right now. We're doing an exhibit of 6 figures, and we were flown here by Southwest Airlines and set up exhibits all over the country. So it helps us to get the word out. And I'm glad you saw our figures.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I often sponsor activities for young people, and I probably have sent about 15 groups of children and youth to the museum to have that experience. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Dr. Martin, tell us more about the figures that you have on exhibit at the museum and about other African-American women who've impacted history.
Well, we tell over 5,000 years of history at the museum, and our figures, including the figures of women, go back those 5,000 years. So we have Queen Anne Nzinga, for example, an amazing woman from Angola who kept the slave trade away from her people and told other Africans that if they were trying to escape the slave trade, they should come to Angola, and she and her army would protect them. She'd get on her horse and lead the charge, lead her army into battle. Or a figure of Rosa Parks. Mrs. Parks visited the museum when she was on her 75th birthday tour, and so we have a picture of her staring at her figure, and just the whole idea that this woman of such courage was here in our space is just very gratifying for me. Or Harriet Tubman. We have her in a scene where she is taking a slave through what looks like a stove into a tunnel, and she's with white abolitionist Thomas Garrett, who worked very closely with her. But this woman who went back into slave territory over 19 times, and with this $40,000 price tag on her head, and she was wanted dead or alive, and the idea that if we can get Harriet Tubman, if we can stop her, if we can control her, then all you mere people, mere mortals almost, that we can certainly stop you. So these women who put their lives on the line daily, and I tell kids that history is made by ordinary people who do extraordinary things, who do not set out and live their lives to get into history books, but do what needs to be done and muster the courage to be able to do that as a way of making the world a better place.
That is just awesome. And speaking of Mrs. Parks, she made such a difference. I even went to her when she was held in state at the Capitol building. I think we waited about 5 hours in the cold, but it was important to just show how important she was to us.
Exactly, and I tell youth that for her it wasn't about a seat on a bus, that it wasn't about sitting down but standing up, and that if they understood that at the time that Rosa Parks did what she did, lynching was very much a reality of life in America, and so it took a courage to live through those times and to have the courage to do the kinds of things that they did and make the achievements that they made. So that also is a part of her legacy, just this whole idea of courage.
You know, my friend, as I was just musing here as you were talking, I have sent children on missions trips to leave the country, and I recently crossed the Mason-Dixon line beyond Maryland. I mean, we're still in the north up here, but I went a little further south, and it's a different country down there. It is a different America, and so I'm rethinking my how I will spend my money for exposure, and I think that it's important for some of the kids that live in the north to go to the south and see how the rest of America lives, and just to understand how opportunities are extended in different parts of the country, and so that they can understand more about the cultural and social foundation of the country. I think education in isolation can be very limiting, and the history of African Americans in the South is just slightly different than the history of African Americans in the North, although both have their issues of oppression, if you will. It's a different story. I came away with a grateful heart, and just understanding just the social dynamic as I was in the South. So that's another discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I fully understand what you're saying, because I am a product of the South, and I'm here now. I'm near home. I'm originally from a small town by the name of Yulee, Florida. So sometimes just seeing what goes on in my state is distressing to me. Mm-hmm. But I feel the same way in Baltimore when I look at the number of youth that we lose through murder, homicide. So just that it is a different dynamic, but a dynamic that says that we've got so many things that we have to fight and try to make better in the North and in the South. You're right. It's something that our kids can visit and get to know.
Mm-hmm. Would you tell us a little bit more about that tour? When one goes on the tour and you take them throughout, history from slavery to the present, what wax figures do they see along the way? Some of the others you mentioned too.
Well, from the walking into the lobby of the museum, you're going to see Hannibal on his elephant and Bessie Coleman, because we try to give you a flavor of the museum and to let you know that you're definitely in a different kind of place. You go through the double doors of the museum, and you will find exhibits on the middle passage. Right there, as you enter the double doors, would be a cotton bale, and interestingly, Lupita from 12 Years of a Slave, who she said that she visited the museum to get into her character, and she saw the bale of cotton, and that helped her to really get into her role and to understand what a 500-pound bale of cotton really looked like, which was key to her role. We have the figures of ancient Africa. So we've got Akhenaten, who helped to lay the foundation for monotheism, or the belief in one God, and the foundation for Christianity and Islam and Judaism, all based on the belief in one God. We've got the Underground Railroad. So we're looking at a Henry Box Brown figure of someone like Dred Scott in the courtroom, fighting to be free because he lived on free territory. The sharecroppers. So looking at that period and going into the museum on one side and looking at this thing, what is this thing called slavery? And on the exit side of the museum, what is this thing called freedom? So that we're looking at education and how we sought to make education synonymous with freedom, or our creative talent in our inventions and writing and so forth, looking at the ways in which we attempted to come together by forming unions. And so with A. Philip Randolph, who also was very key to the March on Washington and doesn't get the kind of credit that he needs and deserves for the role that he played in the March on Washington. Looking at the civil rights leaders like a Martin Luther King and a Rosa Parks that you would expect, but also Medgar Evers and those people who were at the heart of the movement. We focus on tragic incidents like lynching, and do not want people to walk away thinking lynching was frontier justice. Taking the words of my late husband, who looked at the issues of the day that we face. There was a line in his message from the ancestors where the ancestors say to our youth, "We didn't die by the millions for you to kill one another by the thousands." So very much a museum that's message-oriented. Individual leaders that made their mark on history, little-known figures that made their mark on history, but always trying to be a museum with a message.
You know, I want to commend you on that beautiful website that you have. You were talking about the Middle Passage, and as I was looking through last night, I mean, I was just compelled to read the whole thing. So if anybody is going to go to the museum, they can go to your website at www.greatblacksinwax.org and just get a taste of what you have at the museum.
That's absolutely right, and we've tried to make our website information rich, and we're always working to improve it, and because we do want people to be able to go to that website and find a sense of who we are as a museum and what you will find, and the fact that just because you were there 10 years ago, that means there is something else that you haven't seen. We have a figure of President Obama, and people who don't know that we have the President Obama figure, or when Nelson Mandela died, people who don't understand that we've had a figure of Nelson Mandela since 1988 when he was in prison, and we talk about those circumstances that led to his imprisonment. Many people know the Nelson Mandela, the kind grandfatherly Nelson Mandela, and that's an important part of his history, but also the Nelson Mandela who fought and who was in prison and so forth.
Okay, my friend, we're going to have to cut to a break. We want to thank Joanne Martin, founder of the National Blacks in Wax Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for being with us this morning.
Do you ever wonder whether God is listening to you or not? Or have you found yourself praying the same prayer over and over again, only to think that this prayer is never going to get answered? There are days when our relationship seems closer than others, but we need to be reminded and be reassured that God is not slack in his promise to always be there. Remember when Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane? His prayer was, "If it's at all possible, will you let this one pass me up, please?" Now, I know I've paraphrased and we may even chuckle, but Jesus had it figured out. He knew that his purpose was to live out the Father's will for his life. So the next time you're tempted to give up on God answering your prayers, or you think that he's not listening at all, just check your meter for his will. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us on the web at urbanfamilytalk.com.
God is mentioned by several different names in the Bible, but sometimes the translation can be tricky. Dr. Tony Evans offers this helpful hint as he brings us the alternative view.
How do you know when you're reading your Bible, you're reading the word Yahweh as opposed to Elohim or some of the other names that we're going to go over in this series? Because when you read your Bible, you will see Jehovah or Yahweh written in all caps, L-O-R-D, and all four are capitalized. You know we're talking about Jehovah as opposed to God as Elohim. If Elohim is God's power name, Jehovah, Yahweh, is God's personal name. When I talk about Elohim, the God who is the creator, I can talk about his power. But when I talk about God as Jehovah, I'm talking about his character. Elohim creates. He's powerful. In the beginning, God, Elohim, created the heavens and the earth. But Jehovah is the God who relates to his creation personally.
Learn to see the Lord not only as creator, but as your provider, your healer, your shepherd, your source of peace, and much more. Get a copy of Dr. Evans' new book, The Power of God's Names. There's deep meaning and power behind those names, something to address all the challenges life throws at you. Visit tonyevans.org today to request your copy of The Power of God's Names. That's tonyevans.org. You've been listening to The Alternative View.
Oh, we're back on Women's Day. This is Vivian Jackson. You're listening to The Harry Jackson Show. We just had our guest, Joanne Martin, founder of the National Blacks in Wax Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. And if you're ever in the Baltimore area, I encourage you to go to the Blacks in Wax Museum. What an educational experience it will be for you. Our next guest on the line is Dr. Alveda King from Alveda King Ministries. We're going to talk about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Are you there, my friend?
Yes, I am. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dr. Alveda. Great to hear from you.
Well, it's good to hear from you, too.
All right, my friend. Just wanted to ask you, most people know about the basic storyline of the atrocities of the King family, but they don't know anything about the extended family of King. Could you share just a little bit about your relationship with Martin Luther King, his family?
I'd be happy to do that. My father, Reverend Alfred Daniel Williams King, or A.D. King as he was known, is Martin Luther King's brother. I say is because they live in heaven now. My uncle was killed. Uncle M.L. was killed in 1968. He was shot. And then my father was mysteriously killed and thrown in a swimming pool in 1969. Also, his brothers, both of their homes were bombed. They were often jailed. They were known as the Sons of Thunder because they would often preach together. And for their preaching style, James and John in the Bible were brothers. They were brothers. And so my father was very close to his brothers, and that is how I am the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay. Well, that's great. So I want to talk to you about this whole this legacy. As we're looking, I was looking in the news the other day, and the controversy of the siblings wanting to sell the Bible and the Nobel Peace Prize, where they had already auctioned off 10,000 items and got about 32 million. They split it between them. Well, as we look at that, if we give away all of the tokens or sell them and auction them off, how can we maintain this legacy? Is the legacy in the items, or is the legacy in the fable, the history that we create?
Well, let me add a couple of things before I answer that question. Now, Martin Luther King Jr.'s papers were sold for $32 million. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And then many of Martin Luther King's books are always on the market. When Uncle ML was alive, he copyrighted his books and some of his speeches and papers, and with the intent of having them sold. As a matter of fact, some of his books were sold during his lifetime because he had a very low preacher's salary, I think about $6,000 a year. And back then, even though even times are different now because of inflation and everything, but $6,000 was not a lot of money then, and it certainly would be nothing now. And
That's
so
right.
he augmented his own salary with the sales of his books. So we knew that he intended to have his books and papers sold. But the issue here is, the $32 million, interestingly enough, it did come out in news reports. This is things that we knew internally. But it finally came out in news reports. Dexter King operates and runs pretty much the King estate, King Inc. And as he does that, he makes a lot of the decisions as to how the estate monies are handled. So from that $32 million, that was not divided equally among the heirs of Martin Luther King, because when that money first got there, Dexter said that there were administrative costs. He paid himself and his partner. He used a lot of that money before there were any distributions. And so that's something that people don't know. Something else that people don't know, I'm a member of the King family, but from the extended branch of A.D. King, and I don't get any money from anything related to Martin Luther King. And so sometimes people, when I'll try to raise money for my ministry or something like that, they'll say, "You Kings are rich. What do? Just throw away money." And I'm saying, wait a minute. Let's look at the whole picture. Now, Bernice King. Now, this is the important thing about the most recent episode. She said to her brother that, one, preachers do not sell their Bible. I'm not being emotional about this, but that was Daddy's travel Bible. That should be an heirloom, not something that we sell. I'm a preacher. I know that he wouldn't. And in some of their mother's inventory list, next to the travel Bible, it has Bernice's name assigned to her by her mother. Now, the Nobel Peace Prize, listen to this, Martin Luther King Jr., when he accepted that, said, "I do not accept this for myself. I accept it on behalf of the downtrodden and the oppressed." So if he did not feel as though it were his award, he was only a trustee, then neither does it belong to his heirs. So they can't sell something of that magnitude that was accepted on behalf of humanity. And so that's where the difference comes. So Bernice simply said, no, let's talk about this. We don't need to sell those heirlooms. And that's where the most recent debate came up. Martin and Dexter sued the King Center, actually, I think, on August 28, 2013, and demanded that Bernice King step down as CEO, that Andrew Young remove himself from the board, and that I remove myself from the board of trustees. And
so my question is the legacy really in the stuff, or is the legacy in the memory and in the work that he did? What are we trying to preserve?
Well, now, to define the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., according to Bernice, according to me, that legacy is in the standards, the principles, the values of what God gave to Martin to share during his lifetime with the world. And so to us, that is the legacy. With Dexter, who is a businessman, it's just in the stuff. I'm not sure. I can't even. Dexter's pretty clear about that. I really cannot answer that from Martin's perspective. But Bernice addresses the spiritual legacy of her father. She does that quite well. And she has not profited off of any of the sales as much as people think, because a lot of the money has always been siphoned off before distribution. And I think that that's something that people have not understood. And so now, and she said it very clearly, too, it's not about me fighting with my brothers. We just have different relationships with God. In other words, Bernice is like, I'm a preacher, Bible is valuable, Nobel Peace Prize belongs to the people, we don't sell them. Bottom line. And more so with Dexter, well, Bible is a book. Daddy said we could sell his books. Let's sell the book. And so I'm not making light of it, but it's just different philosophies and different perspectives. Now, the real challenge here, though, is the media often, especially the big, huge mainstream media, likes to have a controversy. And they want to stir up something as if those three siblings hate each other. They don't. They absolutely don't. They actually love each other. They just actually have those philosophical differences.
But, you know, this, because of the public image of the family, just because it's Dr. King's family, anything that they do is going to come to the forefront. And so do you think that this casts a bad light on his legacy? All the bickering with the among the siblings, the children?
I believe it does cast a bad light in this manner. It puts them out there without showing the whole picture of who they are and what they're up against. But I believe that they have a wonderful opportunity to now go through the 6 steps of nonviolent conflict resolution that their father used during the Civil Rights Movement. And that one is information gathering, education, personal commitment to resolving these matters nonviolently, negotiation, direct action, and then restoration or reconciliation. So now Bernice did something that was almost unprecedented among them. She has never gone to the press. She only went to the press because of the magnitude of this decision. It's the Bible of her father, the travel Bible. President Obama was sworn in with it. I thought that was kind of political myself, not spiritual. But he signed it. And so that even made it, perhaps to the eyes of some, more valuable, quote unquote. But you can't really put a price on a preacher's travel Bible. It's just a spiritual.
On any preacher's Bible, not just
spiritual
on any
issue.
preacher's Bible, not just his,
I
but
said
any
a
preacher's Bible.
You heard me? That's what I said. A preacher. I didn't say Martin Luther King. A preacher's travel Bible. In fact,
right.
you should see mine, the one that I read every day, and I bring it with me when I'm on the road. And so you can't put a value on that. There's a spiritual value there that has nothing to do with money. You can give unto Caesar what's Caesar's, but give unto God what is God's. And the Nobel Peace Prize, too, for instance, Martin really gave a rebuke to the awardees of the prize. In other words, he said, okay, I'll accept this not for myself, on behalf of the oppressed. But if you really want to have peace, you must give peace to the least of these. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the speech in front of me. And so he said, don't try to buy me with an award. I won't take your money. I'll give it to the movement. I'll take this award in trust for those who have been oppressed. Because he was a man of God. And so I really understood why Bernice went to the media this time. She agonized over it. She's a very reserved person. She's a strong woman of God, very anointed, but she didn't want to have a media circus, but it was necessary to speak. And her brothers, on the other hand, as I say, Dexter is a businessman, bottom line. And Martin, I can't answer about. I can't be as clear. I can say that Bernice is a preacher, and she's a spiritual, anointed woman of God. I can say very clearly that Dexter is a businessman. I believe that Martin has much of the heart of his parents, his father and his mother, but he's just not quite found that voice that where he can really articulate that. So that's as much as I can say about Marty.
Well, I can say they're in a very precarious position. The spotlight is always on them, and they're dealing with those economic issues that we're all dealing with. Our dollar's worth a lot less than it used to be, and you have something that seems to have an apparent value, and you wonder, is now the time to get rid of it? Am I hoarding, that kind of thing? So, but I want to ask you some questions about your ministry.
Before you ask me your next question, Bishop Jackson and I did pray right at the beginning of this part of the episode, and he and I were both remembering that how young those three were when their father was killed. And so for people to imagine that they would be the new Martin Luther King, and they're not. They have their own individual personalities and character. They experience so many shocks and hardships based upon the death of their father. And I think sometimes people forget that as well.
Right, and they were children, and I'm sure, like most children, they swore certain vows. Boy, when I grow up, I am never going to do, and when I grow up, then they better do, And so that too is a part of life. And so, we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to get a chance to ask you some questions about Priest for Life. Can you just share briefly about that ministry too?
Yes, Priest for Life Ministries, umbrellas under Gospel of Life Ministries. That's the more global aspect of the ministry. It is a pro-life Catholic ministry. I'm not Catholic. I'm not denominational Christian, but working with Father Frank Pavone and Janet Milana and the other associates and staff. My uncle, M.L., had a dream that Protestants and Catholics and Gentiles and Jews would join together and stay free at last. So we work for the freedom of the babies in the womb, of the sick, of the elderly, no euthanasia, no abortion, no carcinogenic birth control that can cause strokes and heart attacks and cancer to the mother. And so that is our work.
Okay. And so this is, you're based out of Atlanta, is that correct?
Well, no, the main office is in New York, Staten Island, New York. My office, African American Outreach, I'm the director of African American Outreach, and we work most of the time out of Atlanta, but I am in New York sometimes as well.
All right, and so but primarily you're working to get this message through churches and community organizations, is that correct?
Well, churches, community organizations, the public at large, to inform, educate, and activate African Americans and all people about the sanctity of life and the value of life from conception until natural death.
Okay, I want to thank you, Dr. Alveda King, for being with us today and for sharing that insight on the King legacy, and I'm glad you were able to get a plug-in for your ministry also. You've been listening to me, Vivian Jackson. This is Women's Day on the Harry Jackson Show. Very important. Don't forget to stop by the Wax Museum in Baltimore and look up Dr. Alveda King Ministries on the internet and find out more about Priest for Life. We hope to see you next week.